So in today's day, I'm going to talk about showing backbone in a job interview, and this advice applies particularly to technical roles. And so first, I'm going to talk about a couple of key pointers you want to keep in mind throughout the interview, and then I'm going to give you a pair of question-answer examples, both a bad and a good one. So let's start with the elements where you want to show backbone in a job interview. And the first one is showing backbone also means in a certain way to paying attention to details in a job interview, because oftentimes, the question you're getting asked might have it doesn't have necessarily to be a trick question, but it might have, some information that you would maybe want clarified. So that's why, being skeptical and even cautious about each question that you're getting asked might also be a better strategy that might suit you well. Now, I'm not telling you here to, to be scared for any question you're getting asked, not by far, but I would challenge you to listen carefully to each question, to pay attention to details, because that's where you exhibit listening skills and basically are in the best position to give your best answers. The second thing you want to keep in mind is many, especially technical candidates, tend to get lost in a job interview. Maybe because the conversation doesn't go your way, maybe because you're exhausted, for whichever reason. But how do you not get lost in a job interview? Well, of course, the generic advice is that if you prepare something in advance, then you won't get lost. But, you can prepare to go for a date and still get lost. So it's not something I found the most efficient as advice, not even for a job interview. But what could help you here is to improve your leadership skills. So for you to be confident to lead the conversation. And by leading, I don't mean, to always have the upper hand on the interviewer, not by far, but you by being able to lead that conversation your own way, then it's also a sign of backbone, at least in my opinion, in a job interview. And this is how you basically avoid getting lost during a job interview. It's a method. So improve your leadership skills. This is the main takeaway here. The next item here, miscommunication. So miscommunication is something very, very common these days, especially when, the whole interview process happens online, digitally, and oftentimes the connection is not that great. So what happens with a poor candidate is that they will answer the question even if they didn't really understand the question. They would rather speculate on what they were asked instead of showing a little bit of backbone and ask them to repeat the question even for the third time, if needed be. So I'd very much encourage you to only answer something if it makes sense to you, and to, if there's a miscommunication, challenge it until it's clear, it becomes clear to you. And again, this is a matter of backbone to a certain extent. The next item I want to touch, and this will be the last one before the example, is to really take your time to answer any question, being behavioral or being technical or being the general types of question in a job interview. Take the time you need to answer that question, because the most important thing for technical roles in particular is that you make sense in a job interview, first and foremost. So regardless if you spend 2 minutes or 10 minutes to answer that question, if you make sense, that will always be perceived as a good starting point, at least, even if they wouldn't be happy with the level of detail, or they would say, okay, can you say it faster? They will hurry up, right? But so long as you make sense in your own way, that to me is also a very important matter, and something, that would project a certain amount of backbone in any candidate. So even if they tell you, hey, my next answer will have to be 10 minutes long, but you only go for 6 minutes or 7 minutes, that will still be fine, so long as you are comfortable, you are happy that you actually made the best sense out of your answer. Now, what is some good and bad examples here for having backbone? So behaviorally speaking here, a well-known behavioral question to test this your backbone is, tell me about time when you had a disagreement with your boss. And a possible answer here would be, well, we just had an important customer that required us something changed, and my boss wanted it done one way, and he was really confident that would be the right way to go, but I literally went above and beyond not to do it that way, and I even done it without him knowing that that would be the best way to do it. And in the end, the customer was happy. So this is a wrong example. It's a wrong example because you actually did not communicate with your boss. You show backbone in a bad way. You show disobedience with your boss. So you, instead of doing whatever they ask you to do, because they're your boss after all, you simply choose not to do it and go your way. And then you self-justified by saying the customer was happy. Well, that doesn't excuse your behavior. So behavioral speaking, this would be a bad example. A better example here would be, we had a very important project with the customer asking us for some major changes. This was a very important project for us. We had 5 resources allocated to it, and I was leading that team. And my boss, had a very different point of view as to how we would resolve that matter. And because I actually disagreed with that approach, I was pretty confident that there are better ways to do it. And since we also had time to have a little back and forth and for me to question his approach, I called upon a meeting and explained clearly the pros and cons of my approach, and also listening at all times, carefully listening to his feedback on my approach. And he actually ended up calling the customer to clarify with them to see whether if my method would be more suitable than his. And in the end, we luckily went my way, and the project was very successful. So notice here the primary difference between the two instances is the communication, the trust in that project. So in the first example, I just said I went behind my boss's back, right? So there was no communication, no trust. In the second example, I emphasized that, especially since we also had a little bit of time there, because if you don't have time, then you cannot really negotiate these outcomes. Then I'd rather call upon a meeting with my boss to show communication, interpersonal skills, and to listen. I also mentioned the keyword listen to whatever he had to say in order to generate trust from that conversation. So this to me is a much better example. Of course, you could make it 10 times better if you added a couple of metrics and you had a bit more context, and you would talk about your specific role that you had here. But I guess you understand the point of showing backbone versus being arrogant with your answer. So this will be the 2 dimensions. I talked about the behaviors you want to keep in mind, to show as having a certain amount of backbone in a job interview. And this is an example of literally doing the behavior of showing backbone in a job interview. So hopefully you found this interesting.